A young boy sends a letter to a wealthy CEO saying, "I need a new dad. Mine left, and my mom hasn't smiled since." What the CEO decides to do next alters their lives forever. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and hit the like button to support the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Ethan Carter barely glanced at the handwritten envelope before tossing it onto the growing pile of letters on his oak desk. He had an entire team dedicated to sorting through requests, investment pitches, and emotional appeals from strangers who believed money could solve everything. Normally, these letters never reached him, but for some reason, this one had. His assistant had set it aside, saying, "You might want to read this one." He should have ignored it. He should have stuck to his usual routine, focusing on numbers, the next deal, the next empire to build. Instead, hours later, after a draining board meeting and with a half-empty glass of whiskey on his desk, his eyes wandered back to the letter. With a sigh, he picked it up, unfolded the slightly crumpled paper, and read, "Asterisk, dear Mr. Carter, my name is Lucas, and I need a new dad. Mine left, and my mom hasn't smiled since. I thought maybe you could help. I don't want money. I just want her to be happy again. Please write back if you can. Asterisk." Ethan stared at the words longer than he should have. He could picture it, a little boy at a kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration as he carefully wrote each letter, hoping a billionaire might care. It was absurd. He wasn't a father. Hell, he wasn't even the type to stay in relationships long enough to consider it. He built companies, not families. Yet, as he sat in the dim glow of his office, the words nagged at him. He tried to push them away, telling himself it wasn't his problem. That night, he barely slept, the letter burning in the back of his mind. By morning, he convinced himself it was just another desperate plea from someone who wanted something from him. He crumpled the letter, tossed it in the trash, and moved on. Except he couldn't. 2 days later, during a meeting with potential investors, his focus slipped. While his legal team discussed profit margins and international expansion, his mind drifted back to the note, to the words that weren't asking for wealth, power, or privilege, just for a mother to smile again. By the end of the week, he gave in. Curiosity. That was all it was. He wasn't getting involved. He just wanted to see who had written that letter, prove to himself it wasn't his concern, and move on. A quick investigation revealed Lucas lived in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, in a house that had seen better days. The grass in the front yard was patchy, the porch slightly uneven, but it wasn't a place of ruin, just one where someone had tried to keep life going despite the weight of what had been lost. Ethan expected the boy to be shy, maybe intimidated by him. He wasn't. When Lucas opened the door, all wide eyes and an oversized hoodie, he squinted up at Ethan like he was studying him. Then, as if unimpressed, he turned back into house and called, "Mom." The rich guy actually showed up. Ethan had to stifle a laugh. Lucas led him into the small living room, where an old couch and a few mismatched chairs sat under the glow of a dim lamp. The house smelled like vanilla and something warm, comforting in a way Ethan hadn't felt in years. "So," Lucas said, climbing onto the couch and sitting cross-legged, "are you here to fix it?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Fix what?" "My mom. You're a billionaire. You fix things. That's what rich guys do, right?" Ethan hesitated. "I think you might have misunderstood what I do." Lucas huffed. "I don't want money. I just want my mom to be happy again." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond to that. Before he could, a woman's voice cut through the air. "Lucas, who?" She stopped in the doorway. And for the first time in Ethan Carter's life, he was completely, utterly speechless. Sophia Bennett, the girl he used to watch across the high school cafeteria, the one he had been too afraid to talk to, the one who used to doodle in the margins of her notebook and hum under her breath when she thought no one was listening. She blinked at him, confusion written across her face. "Ethan." The way she said his name sent something sharp through his chest. He barely managed to nod. Lucas looked between them, then pointed at his mother accusingly. "You do know him." "I knew it." Ethan cleared his throat. "We went to school together." Sophia crossed her arms, looking weary. "Yeah, a long time ago." Lucas grinned. "She had a crush on you, you know." Ethan almost choked. He turned to Sophia, who was now glaring at her son. Lucas. What? It's true. I saw the yearbook. Ethan felt like the ground had just tilted. Yearbook? Lucas nodded. She circled your face. With a heart. Sophia looked like she wanted to disappear. Ethan, however, found himself grinning for the first time in days. Did she? Sophia groaned. You should go. Ethan took a step forward, his grin fading. Lucas wrote me a letter. Her expression shifted instantly. Her protectiveness flared, like a lioness ready to defend. He did what? I asked him to fix you, Lucas piped up. Ethan watched as Sophia's shoulders slumped, something pain crossing her face. Lucas, sweetheart, I don't need. Yes, you do, he interrupted. You don't laugh anymore. You barely smile. You still set the dinner table for 3, even though it's just us. Silence. Ethan saw it then. The weight in her eyes, the exhaustion, the sorrow that lingered just beneath the surface. What happened? He asked, softer now. Sophia exhaled slowly, lowering herself onto the armrest of the couch. Lucas's father. He was a gambling addict. He lost everything. And when there was nothing left, he walked out. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Just like that. Just like that. Sophia fought to keep her voice steady, refusing to let herself break in front of her son. Something unfamiliar stirred in Ethan. Maybe it was the way Lucas had written to him. Not for himself, but for her. Maybe it was the way Sophia looked at him now, as if letting him in was the most dangerous thing she could do. Maybe it was the simple fact that fate had dropped him on her doorstep when she had once circled his face with a heart. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, and he had no idea what to do next. Ethan couldn't get them out of his head. The moment he left their house, the image of Lucas's hopeful face and Sophia's guarded expression stayed with him, lingering like a song he couldn't turn off. He told himself he had done what he came to do. He had met the boy, learned the situation, and confirmed it was none of his business. But as he sat in his office, staring at the city skyline, he knew that was a lie. It was his business now. And Ethan Carter didn't walk away from things that mattered. So he did what he had always done. He solved the problem. First, he paid off Sophia's debts. It was simple. A few phone calls, a quick wire transfer. Then, after seeing the worn-out sedan in their driveway, he had a sleek new car sent to her house, along with an expensive gift basket filled with chocolates, spa treatments, and high-end wine. It was an elegant, effortless fix. Except it wasn't. The next day, Ethan's assistant walked into his office carrying the very same gift basket. Miss Bennett returned this, she said, setting it down with an amused look. And the car? She sent it back to the dealership, said she doesn't accept charity. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Of course, she did. Sophia had always been strong-willed, independent. He should have known throwing money at the problem wouldn't work. He wasn't trying to make her feel like a charity case. But that's exactly what he had done. If money wasn't the way in, he needed a different approach. Something that wouldn't make her feel like she was being fixed, but rather like she was being seen. The next day, he showed up at her doorstep again. She opened the door, arms crossed, already looking annoyed. Unless you're here to take back your money, I'm not interested. Ethan smirked. I have a different offer. She sighed. Ethan? Lucas, he interrupted, turning his attention to the boy sitting cross-legged on the couch. You ever been on a private jet? Lucas's eyes widened. No, he breathed, voice filled with wonder. Ethan shoved his hands into his pockets, pretending to be casual. Well, I have one, and I was thinking of taking a little trip this weekend. Maybe to an island. Ocean views, crystal clear water, no responsibilities. He glanced at Sophia. You could use a break. Sophia's expression flickered with hesitation. Please, Mom, Lucas interrupted, practically bouncing in place. A private jet? An island? Are you serious right now? Ethan fought back a grin. Completely? Sophia gave him a long, wary look. What's the catch? No catch, Ethan said simply. Just a weekend. No debt payoffs, no gifts. Just some time away. Sophia hesitated. Then she sighed, glancing at Lucas, whose expression was pleading. Fine, but I'm not accepting anything from you. If we go, we pay for our own food. Ethan chuckled. Sure, we'll split the check. Lucas was practically vibrating with excitement as they stepped onto the jet. This is insane, he said, running his hands over the leather seats, eyes wide as he took in the lavish interior. You really own this? Yep, Ethan said, amused by the wonder in his voice. Lucas turned to Sophia. Mom, did you know people actually live like this? Sophia shot Ethan a look. I'm aware. Lucas had no such reservations. He tested the reclining seats, poked at the buttons, and gawked at the flight attendant offering refreshments. When the pilot came out to greet them, Ethan saw his opportunity. You ever been in a cockpit before? He asked Lucas. Lucas shook his head rapidly. No way. Ethan nodded toward the pilot. Take him up front. Let him see how it works. The pilot smiled. Come on, kid. Lucas practically sprinted toward the front, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone in the quiet cabin. She folded her arms, leaning back into her seat. This is a terrible idea. Ethan arched a brow. Because you might actually enjoy it? Because I don't know what you want from this. Ethan exhaled. I don't want anything. Sophia, I saw Lucas's letter. I saw you, and I couldn't just walk away. Sophia looked at him, something flickering behind her guarded expression. That's the problem, Ethan. You can walk away. You have a life, a big, expensive, high-powered life. This isn't your problem to fix. He studied her for a moment. Maybe it's not about fixing anything. She shook her head, letting out a dry laugh. Then what is it about? Ethan wasn't sure how to answer. So he just looked at her, really looked at her. The girl he had once admired from a distance, now sitting across from him, still strong, still resilient, still trying so hard to hold everything together. Before he could say anything else, Lucas came running back, practically bursting with excitement. I gotta press a button. Ethan grinned. Yeah? Which one? The best one. The pilot said it was just for show, but I totally flew the plane. Sophia smiled, shaking her head. But Ethan noticed something. Her expression had softened. Maybe she wasn't completely miserable about this trip. After all, the island was even more breathtaking than Ethan remembered. The sky stretched endlessly over a turquoise ocean, the sun casting a golden glow over the white sand. Lucas took off running the second they stepped onto the beach, kicking off his shoes and splashing into the waves. Ethan and Sophia followed at a slower pace. She had her arms wrapped around herself, her expression worried despite the beauty around her. You don't relax much, do you? Ethan asked. She shot him a look. You think single moms get a lot of free time? Fair point. She let out a breath. I don't want Lucas getting attached to something temporary. Ethan hesitated. Who said it's temporary? Sophia turned to face him fully, her expression guarded. Ethan, you don't belong in this world. In our world. I appreciate everything you've done, but this isn't some grand fairy tale where a billionaire swoops in and makes everything better. Ethan studied her for a long moment. And what if I don't want to swoop in? What if I just want to be here? Sophia's eyes searched his, but before she could answer, Lucas came barreling toward them, dripping wet and grinning. Mom, Ethan, the water's amazing. You have to come in. Ethan smirked. Sounds like an invitation. Sophia sighed, shaking her head. I am not getting in that water. Lucas pouted. Come on, just for a little bit. Ethan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. What? Afraid to have fun. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Oh, you wish? And before she could think twice, Ethan took her hand and pulled her toward the waves. She yelped as the water hit her ankles, laughing despite herself. And for the first time since he'd met her again, Ethan saw it. The smile Lucas had been waiting for. It was worth every single mistake he had made trying to get her there. Ethan wasn't used to slowing down. His life had always been about momentum, chasing the next deal, the next acquisition, the next success. But here on the island, time moved differently. There were no ringing phones, no urgent emails, no meetings to dominate. Instead, There was the rhythmic sound of the ocean, the warmth of the sun on his skin, and the laughter of a little boy who had started to warm his way into his heart in a way Ethan never expected. And then there was Sophia. She was a contradiction. Soft yet sharp, guarded yet undeniably magnetic. He had seen glimpses of the girl he remembered from high school, the one he had been too intimidated to approach. But she wasn't just that girl anymore. She was a mother now, a woman who had been hurt and left to pick up the pieces. Someone who had learned to survive without expecting anyone to stay. Ethan wanted to prove her wrong. The weekend unfolded in ways he hadn't planned. He had thought this trip would be a strategic move, a way to show Sophia and Lucas a life without struggles, to ease some of their burdens. But it wasn't about that anymore. It wasn't about money or solutions. It was about moments. Lucas soaked from the ocean, challenging him to a sandcastle contest. Sophia rolling her eyes but sitting beside him anyway, sculpting towers with delicate fingers. Ethan letting Lucas bury him in the sand, only for the boy to cackle wildly as Sophia snapped a photo. It was easy uncomplicated. And for a man whose life had been built on control and structure, it was terrifying how much he wanted to hold on to it. That night, Ethan had something planned. A private beachside dinner. Nothing extravagant, just something special. He had remembered a conversation from high school, one where Sophia had once mentioned wanting to eat dinner under the stars. Just her and someone special, no distractions. Back then, he had imagined what it would have been like to be that person. Now, he had the chance to make it real. Lucas had crashed early, exhausted from the day of sun and adventure, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone as the sky darkened to a deep blue, stars beginning to scatter across the horizon. She had been quiet all evening, watching the waves, her thoughts distant. "You're thinking too much," Ethan said as they walked toward the candlelit table set up just past the shore. Sophia glanced at him. "I have a lot to think about." He pulled out her chair, smirking. "Try not to overanalyze. Just enjoy." She hesitated before sitting down, eyeing the flickering candles, the soft glow of the lanterns illuminating the sand. "This is nice." "I'm very good at nice," he teased, pouring them each a glass of wine. "You should let yourself enjoy it." She exhaled, taking a sip, and he caught the way her shoulders relaxed just slightly. The ocean breeze played with the loose strands of her hair, and Ethan had to remind himself to breathe. She had always been beautiful, but here, in this light, with the waves as a backdrop, she looked like something out of a dream. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. It wasn't until they were halfway through their meal that she finally said, "I still don't understand why you're doing this." Ethan set down his glass. "You really think I don't care?" "I think men like you don't usually concern themselves with people like me," she said honestly. "You have everything. You don't have to be here." He leaned forward. "And yet I am." Sophia looked away, staring at the water. "Ethan, this isn't fairy tale. Men like you don't just..." Something in his chest tightened. "Men like me?" She let out a dry laugh. "You don't understand what it's like. To be left behind. To wake up every day and wonder if the person you loved ever really loved you at all." Ethan didn't answer right away. He hadn't lived her life. He didn't know what it was like to have a husband walk out, to be left alone with a child, to carry that weight alone. But he did know what it was like to grow up always wanting more, to chase after something that fell just out of reach. And right now, that something was sitting across from him, convinced he was going to leave. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. "You know, back in high school, I had this huge crush on this girl." Sophia arched a brow. "Oh." She was funny, smart, way out of my league, he said with a smirk. "I was convinced she never even knew I existed." Sophia's lips twitched. "Sound like a tragedy." "It was," he mused, "especially since I found out recently that she apparently didn't know I existed. And she even circled my face in her yearbook." Sophia groaned, covering her face with her hands. "Lucas has the biggest mouth." Ethan chuckled. "I should thank him. If I'd known back then, who knows?" She dropped her hands, looking at him carefully. "But we didn't know back then." "No," he admitted, "but we know now." Silence stretched between them, the air thick with something unspoken. It would be so easy to lean in, to close the distance, to take the moment that had been waiting for them for years. But then Sophia shook her head, pushing back her chair. I should go check on Lucas. Ethan frowned. Sophia, this is a lot, she said, standing. And I just need to think. He wanted to stop her, wanted to tell her that not every man walked away. That maybe, just maybe, he had been waiting for her just as much as she had been waiting for him. But he knew pushing her wouldn't work. So instead, he let her go, watching as she disappeared into the house. Ethan ran a hand over his face, frustrated. He had spent his life winning. But this wasn't a deal to be closed. It wasn't a business strategy. It was Sophia. And he had a feeling she was going to make him work for it. That was fine. Ethan Carter wasn't the type to give up. The plane touched down smoothly on the tarmac. But for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he wasn't ready to return to reality. The island had been an escape, a bubble where he could pretend for a moment that he belonged in a world outside of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. But now, as he watched Sophia gather their things, carefully avoiding his eyes, he knew that whatever had started between them was fragile, too fragile to force. Lucas, on the other hand, had no reservations. He bounced excitedly in his seat, still high off the trip, practically vibrating with energy. That was awesome, he declared. Mom, did you see the way Ethan jumped in the water with his clothes on? Rich people never do stuff like that. Sophia sighed but hid a smile. Lucas, you can't just assume things about people. But it's true, he said matter-of-factly. He's cool for a billionaire. Ethan chuckled. High praise. Lucas grinned, then suddenly dug into his backpack. Oh, I almost forgot. He pulled out a sheet of paper, carefully folded into a neat square, and handed it to Ethan. Here. Ethan unfolded it slowly, taking the title written in large, uneven letters at the top. Dad application form. Below that, Lucas had scribbled out a list of questions, some serious, some completely ridiculous. Asterisk 1. Will you stay? Y/N. Circle 1. No takebacks. 2. Do you like pizza? Important. 3. Are you okay with my mom telling you what to do? She does that a lot. 4. Can you beat me in Mario Kart? Bet you can't. 5. Do you promise not to leave like my real dad? This one is serious. Asterisk. Ethan's chest tightened as he read that last question. He swallowed, glancing at Sophia. But she looked away, pretending to adjust the strap on her bag. He knew what she was thinking. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. Lucas, oblivious, grinned up at him. You don't have to fill it out right now. But just, think about it. Ethan folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. I'll give it some serious thought. That seemed to satisfy Lucas, who nodded approvingly. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself doing things he never thought he'd do. Showing up at a kid's soccer game, for one. He stood on the sidelines in his usual tailored suit, looking ridiculously out of place among the other parents in their jeans and team T-shirts. He ignored the curious looks from the moms whispering nearby and focused on the field, where Lucas was running with a determination that made Ethan grin. When Lucas scored a goal, he turned immediately to look for Ethan in the crowd, his face lighting up when he saw him there. Ethan lifted a hand in a small salute, and Lucas puffed out his chest before running back to his teammates. Then there was a science project. Ethan, who had never built anything without an entire team of engineers doing it for him, found himself knee-deep in glue, cardboard, and what he suspected was glitter glue, even though Lucas swore it wasn't. The volcano model was supposed to be simple, but by the time Ethan was done, he had overcomplicated it so much that it looked like a prototype for a real disaster prevention system. It's too good, Lucas declared. They're going to think I cheated. Ethan smirked. Then you'll just have to explain that you had an expert consultant. And then there was the cooking incident. Ethan had never cooked a day in his life. But somehow, after Sophia mentioned offhandedly that she was too tired to make dinner, he had offered. That had been a mistake. What was supposed to be pasta ended up being an unrecognizable mess of burned noodles, questionable sauce, an actual fire hazard that set off the smoke alarm. Lucas laughed so hard, he almost fell out of his chair. Ethan, you're the worst billionaire chef ever. Sophia, trying to hold back laughter herself, shook her head. Okay, that's it. We're ordering pizza. Ethan, covered in flour and somehow a little bit of cheese, threw up his hands. I admit defeat. Lucas grinned and Sophia, watching him, let out a breath. He hadn't laughed like this in a long time. But the more Ethan inserted himself into their lives, the more Sophia's fears grew. She didn't miss the way Lucas idolized him, the way he started waiting at the window around the time Ethan usually showed up, the way he talked about him as if he were already part of the family. It terrified her, because she had seen this before, not with Ethan, but with Lucas's father, the slow build-up of trust, the way promises were made, until one day they weren't. One evening, as they were cleaning up after another failed attempt at dinner, Sophia finally voiced what had been weighing on her. You do realize he thinks you're staying, right? Ethan, who had been wiping his hands on a dish towel, paused. What? Lucas, she gestured toward the living room, where the boy was sprawled out on the couch, flipping through a book. He thinks this is permanent, that you're permanent. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, he said, maybe it is. Sophia's throat tightened. Don't say that unless you mean it. He set the towel down. Sophia, I can't let him go through that again, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. I won't, Ethan said, stepping closer, his expression soft but serious. I don't plan on leaving. She exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand over her face. Ethan, I don't know how to trust that. Ethan studied her for a long time, then pulled something from his jacket pocket, the crumpled dad application form. Sophia's breath caught. I haven't filled it out yet, he admitted, unfolding it carefully. But I don't take decisions lightly, Sophia. And this is something I take very seriously. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Lucas got up to answer it. And when Sophia saw who was standing there, her stomach dropped. A man she hadn't seen in years. Lucas's father. Her ex smiling like he had never left. Sophia felt her stomach drop as she took in a man standing at her doorstep. Her ex-husband, Daniel, looked almost exactly the same. Same sharp features. Same easy smirk. But his eyes had the telltale signs of someone who had spent too long chasing the wrong things. Bloodshot. Restless. Hollow. Lucas, standing between them, stiffened. He didn't move closer. Didn't say Dad, or run into his arms like a child desperate for a reunion. Instead, he just looked up at Sophia with quiet uncertainty, waiting for her reaction. She found her voice. What are you doing here? Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets like this was just another casual visit, like he hadn't walked out on them years ago. Heard you've been keeping some wealthy company lately. His gaze flickered past her to where Ethan was standing near the dining room, silent but unmistakably present. His smirk stretched. Guess I shouldn't be surprised. Sophia's fingers curled into fists. You need to leave. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. Come on, Sophia. No need to be so cold. I just wanted to talk. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and sharp. She asked you to leave. Daniel's eyes darkened, but he didn't move. Relax, big guy. This isn't your concern. Sophia swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. It isn't your concern either, Daniel. You lost the right to be here the day you walked out. Daniel let out a laugh, humorless and bitter. Come on, Sophia. You really think I wanted to leave? I had to. Lucas, silent until now, spoke. You didn't have to. You just did. The quiet weight of his words settled in the space between them. Daniel faltered for just a second, his mouth tightening. Sophia grabbed Lucas's shoulder and gently nudged behind her. I don't know what you want, but we're done here. Daniel scoffed. I'm trying, okay? Trying to be better. Trying to fix things. And now that you've got... His gaze flickered back to Ethan. Help. I figured maybe you could return the favor. The implications settled in instantly. Sophia's blood ran cold. You want money? Daniel spread his hands. Look, I got into a bit of trouble, all right? And I just figured, since your new boyfriend is loaded. Ethan's voice was like steel. You need to leave. Now. Daniel's smirk vanished. I'm talking to her. Ethan moved before Sophia could stop him, stepping between her and Daniel with a quiet authority that sent an unmistakable message. This ends here. Daniel let out a dry chuckle, but Sophia could see the shift in his expression. He wasn't as confident anymore. Ethan's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of something dangerous. If you come near them again, I will make sure you regret it. For a moment, Daniel looked like he was considering pushing his luck. But then, with a roll of his shoulders, he took a step back, shaking his head like they were all overreacting. Fine, he muttered, already turning away. I'll figure out myself. He walked off without looking back. Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Lucas didn't say anything. He just turned and walked back into the house without a word. Ethan's jaw was still tight. Are you okay? Sophia took a second to steady herself, then looked up at him. I don't need you to fight my battles for me, Ethan. His brows pulled together. Sophia, Her voice was sharper than she meant it to be. She exhaled. I get it. You want to help. But this isn't some business problem you can fix by throwing money or power at it. Ethan's expression darkened. That wasn't about money or power. That was about keeping you and Lucas safe. I can handle Daniel, she shot back. I've been handling him for years. And I won't have you swoop in and make me feel like some helpless project you need to fix. Ethan took a step back, hurt flashing across his face. Is that what you think this is? Some project? Sophia let out a frustrated sigh. I don't know what this is, Ethan, but I do know that I can't let Lucas get attached to something. Someone who might not be here tomorrow. His expression turned stony. I told you I'm not leaving. Sophia shook her head. You say that now. But what happens when you realize this isn't some perfect fantasy? That we're not some luxury getaway you can visit whenever you want to feel something different? Ethan clenched his jaw. You don't trust me. Sophia felt something in her chest ache. I can't trust you, Ethan. Not when Lucas's heart is on the line. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of it all hung in the air. Too much, too fast, too complicated. Finally, Ethan exhaled, his voice quieter. Sophia, I'm not Daniel. She swallowed hard. I know, but that doesn't mean you won't leave. The words cut. Ethan could feel them settling into his skin like a wound he hadn't seen coming. He had fought for everything in his life. Business deals, empires, success. But this wasn't something he could fight his way into. This was Sophia, and she was slipping away. Without another word, she turned and walked into the house. Ethan stood there for a long moment before pulling the crumpled dad application form from his pocket. He looked at the last question. Asterisk, do you promise not to leave like my real dad? This one is serious. Asterisk. Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the empty space where his answer should have been. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. The distance between them was suffocating. After the argument, Ethan did exactly what Sophia wanted. He backed off. He stopped dropping by unannounced. Stopped showing up to Lucas's soccer games. Stopped calling. He told himself he was giving her space, letting her breathe. But the truth was, he had no idea what to do. He had built an empire out of certainty. Every move in his life had been calculated. Every decision made with logic and precision. But this was a storm he didn't know how to navigate. He had always known how to win. But this wasn't about winning. And maybe that was a problem. Lucas noticed the shift immediately. He wasn't a kid who missed things. And no matter how much Sophia tried to pretend that everything was normal, he wasn't buying it. One evening, he sat at the dinner table, picking at his food. Ethan hasn't been around much. Sophia's grip on her fork tightened. He's busy. Lucas frowned. You told him to leave, didn't you? She hesitated. Lucas. You did. He pushed his plate away, his voice rising. I knew you would. You always do this. You don't let people stay. Sophia flinched, pain flickering in her eyes. That's not fair. Lucas shook his head. No, you're not being fair. You think if you push him away first, it won't hurt when he leaves. But what if he wasn't going to leave? What if you just made him? Sophia opened her mouth to answer. But Lucas had already stormed off to his room, the sound of his door slamming echoing through the house. Sophia exhaled shakily, pressing her fingers to her temples. Had she made a mistake? Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at his phone. He had started and deleted a dozen texts to Sophia. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to fix it. But maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't know how to stay. Then he saw it. A small note, folded neatly, sitting on his desk. Ethan frowned, picking it up and unfolding it. The handwriting was messy, written in pencil, the letters uneven. Asterisk if you love her. Don't give up. Lucas. Asterisk. Ethan inhaled sharply, gripping the note tighter. The kid had snuck into his office. And somehow, he had said in 7 words what Ethan had been trying to figure out for weeks. He sat back, running a hand through his hair. Did he love her? It was a terrifying thought. But as he sat there, staring at Lucas's words, the answer settled into his chest like a truth he had always known, but never dared to say out loud. Yes, he did. And suddenly, the question wasn't if he could stay. It was how he could convince Sophia to let him. Later that day, Sophia found herself outside Ethan's office building. She hadn't meant to come. She had told herself she was moving on, that she was protecting Lucas, protecting herself. But Lucas's words had been circling her mind ever since their argument. You don't let people stay. Had she done that? Had she pushed Ethan away because she was too afraid to hope? Before she could overthink it, she stepped inside, heading for the elevator. When she reached his office, his assistant wasn't at her desk, leaving the door slightly ajar. Sophia hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open. Her breath caught. On the wall, behind his desk, was a framed piece of paper. Not an award, not a business certificate. Lucas's dad application form. She took a shaky step forward, her eyes scanning the familiar questions, the messy handwriting. And at the bottom, where there had once been an empty space, there was now an answer written in bold ink. Yes. Sophia's throat tightened. He hadn't thrown it away. She heard movement behind her and turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, watching her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, he said, I never wanted to leave. Sophia exhaled, her hands shaking. Then why did you? Ethan stepped closer. Because you told me to. She looked at him then, really looked at him. The man who had stepped into her son's life, who had shown up, who had made Lucas laugh again, who had made her laugh again. The man who had, against all odds, made her believe that maybe, just maybe, some people did stay. Ethan, her voice was barely a whisper. I love you, he said, the words raw and certain. And I love Lucas. And I don't know how to convince you that I'm not going anywhere, but I will spend every single day proving it if I have to. Sophia swallowed hard. I'm scared. He nodded. I know, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in years, Sophia let herself believe it. Ethan had spent his life perfecting grand gestures, closing billion-dollar deals, orchestrating corporate takeovers, throwing lavish events that made headlines. He knew how to impress, how to command attention, how to make the world stop and look. But this time, he didn't need the world to look. He just needed her. Sophia had always seen through the money, through the power. From the very beginning, she had challenged him in ways no one else ever had. She hadn't been impressed by his wealth, hadn't been swayed by his influence. She had wanted something real. And for the first time in his life, Ethan wanted to be that for someone. So he went back to the simplest thing he could think of. No money, no extravagance, just effort. It took him longer than it should have, fumbling through a recipe that looked nothing like the effortless instructions had suggested. The first attempt was a disaster. The second wasn't much better. But by the third, he had something edible, slightly overcooked, a little uneven, but made with his own 2 hands. By the time he arrived at Sophia's workplace, the paper bag carrying his slightly burnt but heartfelt attempt at dinner was warm in his hands. The security guard gave him a wary look. Ethan Carter, standing in the lobby of a modest little office building with takeout bags like some hopeful teenager waiting outside prom night. He didn't care. The receptionist looked startled as he stepped up to the desk. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here for Sophia Bennett," he said, shifting the bag in his hand. "Can you let her know I'm waiting?" The woman's brows lifted slightly, but she nodded and picked up the phone. Minutes later, Sophia stepped into the lobby, looking both confused and slightly alarmed. Her eyes darted to the bag in his hands. "What are you doing here?" He let out a breath and held up the bag. "Bringing you dinner." Sophia folded her arms, giving him a wary look. "Did you buy it?" "No," he admitted. "I cooked it." Her expression flickered. He could tell she wasn't sure whether to believe him. "It's probably terrible," he added. "But I figured if I was going to prove something, I should at least do it right." She raised a brow. "And what exactly are you trying to prove?" Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That I get it now. That money can't fix everything. That love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about what you choose. Every single day." Sophia's lips parted slightly, her breath catching. "I choose you," Ethan said, voice steady. "I choose Lucas. And I'll keep choosing you both. Every day. If you'll have me." For a long moment, Sophia just stared at him. The entire lobby seemed to still, the quiet hum of office workers moving around them fading into the background. Then, finally, her expression softened. "You really cooked it?" she murmured, her lips twitching. "Burned it a little," he admitted. "Okay, a lot." Sophia let out a breath, shaking her head, and then, before he could fully process it, she stepped forward, reached up, and kissed him. Right there, in the middle of the office lobby, in front of the stunned receptionist, the amused security guard, and half a dozen coworkers pretending not to watch. She kissed him. Ethan froze for half a second, then melted into it, his free hand reaching for her waist, pulling her close. She tasted like something sweet, something familiar, something he'd been waiting for without ever realizing it. When she pulled away, her eyes were shining. "Yes," she whispered. Ethan frowned slightly. "Yes." She smiled. "Yes, I'll have you." Ethan felt something in his chest loosen, something tight and fearful and uncertain, gone in an instant. He grinned. "Good, because I wasn't planning on going anywhere." Sophia shook her head, taking the bag from his hands. "Let's see how bad you actually burned this." Ethan chuckled. "Brace yourself." And as they walked out of the office together, side by side, he knew without a doubt this was home. The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were theirs. Ethan had spent his life chasing success, always moving, always building, always looking ahead. But now, for the first time, he wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next expansion, or the next business empire. Instead, he was thinking about what to make Lucas for breakfast, whether Sophia preferred coffee or tea in the morning, how to make space in his once sterile penthouse for a 7-year-old's ever-growing collection of action figures and soccer gear. It was an adjustment, one he hadn't expected to love as much as he did. Sophia still teased him relentlessly about his cooking, especially after another failed attempt at pancakes that somehow resulted in the fire alarm blaring at 6 in the morning. Lucas had never laughed so hard. "You're the worst billionaire chef in history," Lucas had declared between gasps of laughter. "Glad to know I've made it into the history books," Ethan had muttered, waving a towel under the smoke detector, while Sophia leaned against the counter, grinning at him. Later that evening, when things had calmed down and Lucas had gone to bed, Ethan had found himself standing in Sophia's tiny kitchen, watching her wash the last of the dishes. The light was soft, her hair falling over one shoulder, and he felt something settle deep in his chest. "You know, I could just hire someone to cook for us," he had said, smirking. Sophia snorted. "Absolutely not. I like watching you struggle." Ethan had stepped closer, looping his arms around her waist from behind, pressing his lips to the side of her neck. "You like watching me struggle?" "Very much," she had teased, leaning back against him. And just like that, his world had shifted. Now, months later, everything felt right. Lucas had stopped waiting at the window for him, because he knew Ethan would always show up. His things had started appearing in Ethan's penthouse. First little things, like a soccer ball tucked in the corner, then bigger things, like a backpack left near the door. Until one day, Sophia had sighed and said, "Face it, Carter. We basically live here now." Ethan had never wanted anything more, but there was still one thing left unfinished. One afternoon, while Lucas was at school and Sophia was out running errands, Ethan sat in his office and pulled open the top drawer of his desk. Inside, neatly tucked between files and papers, was a slightly crumpled piece of paper he had kept for months. Lucas's dad application form, the same one he had stared at that night after their argument, unsure if he had the right to answer. Now he picked up a pen, smoothing out the wrinkles. His eyes skimmed over questions, amused at some of the things Lucas had thought were important. *1. Will you stay? Y/N, circle 1. No takebacks, *. Ethan circled yes. *2. Do you like pizza? Important, *. He smirked and wrote yes, but only if someone else makes it. *3. Are you okay with my mom telling you what to do? She does that a lot, *. Mia smiled against his lips, her hands resting lightly on his chest. Not anymore, she murmured, her voice soft but steady. Finn grinned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Felix, watching from the doorway, grinned. Can we have pancakes for breakfast? Mia groaned, pulling away from Finn. Not again. Last time you tried, we nearly burned the kitchen down. Finn held up his hands in mock surrender. I'll stick to ordering takeout this time. Felix laughed, running to the table. Best dad ever. The words hit Finn like a warm wave, settling deep in his chest. He glanced at Mia, who was smiling at him, her eyes shining with something he couldn't quite name. You heard the kid, she said, her tone teasing but tender. Best dad ever. Finn chuckled, shaking his head. I'm just trying to keep up with the competition. Mia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're not competing with anyone, Finn. You're already winning. He felt his throat tighten, the weight of her words sinking in. For so long, he had chased success, measured in deals and dollars. But this was something he had never dared to dream of. A family, a home, a love that didn't come with conditions or expiration dates. Later that day, Finn found himself alone in his office, the dad application form still tucked in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out, smoothing the edges, and read it again. The questions, the answers, the promise he had made. He reached for a pen and added one more line at the bottom, in bold, clear letters. *7. Do you promise to love him forever? He didn't hesitate. Yes. When Mia found him later, sitting at his desk with the paper in front of him, she didn't say anything. She just walked over, leaned down, and kissed the top of his head. You're doing a good job, you know, she said softly. Finn looked up at her, his heart full. I'm just trying to keep up with you. Mia smiled, her hand resting on his shoulder. You're not just keeping up, Finn. You're setting the bar. He reached for her hand, pulling her into his lap. I love you, he said, the word simple, but carrying the weight of everything he felt. Mia's eyes softened. I love you, too. And in that moment, Finn knew this wasn't just a life he had stumbled into. It was a life he had been searching for all along. The months turned into years, and the three of them grew into something Finn had never imagined possible. There were still moments of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty, but they faced them together. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Felix curled up between them. Finn felt a sense of peace he had never known. Hey, Finn, Felix said, looking up at him. Yeah, kid. Thanks for not leaving. Finn's throat tightened, and he pulled Felix closer, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Thanks for letting me stay. Mia reached over, her hand finding his, and Finn knew this was it. This was everything. And he wouldn't trade it for the world. Sophia sighed, resting her forehead against his. No, she murmured. Ethan smirked. Good, because I'm really bad at making pancakes, and I need you to take over. She laughed, shaking her head. Fine, but only because Lucas deserves a decent breakfast. Ethan grinned. And because you love me. Sophia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. Yeah. And just like that, the last of her doubts faded. Because love wasn't just about words. It was about choosing each other over and over again. The days that followed felt lighter, like a weight had finally lifted. Sophia stopped waiting for Ethan to change his mind, and Ethan, in turn, made sure she never had a reason to doubt. There were no more quiet hesitations, no more glances filled with unspoken fears. There was only them, mornings filled with warmth, the scent of coffee and burnt toast as Ethan continued his battle with the toaster. Afternoons spent chasing Lucas around the backyard, the sound of laughter echoing through the house. Evenings curled up on the couch, Ethan reading while Sophia rested her head on his shoulder. Lucas occasionally falling asleep between them, his small hand wrapped around Ethan's. One night, as they stood on the back porch, watching Lucas chase fireflies in the yard, Sophia slipped her hand into Ethan's. "I was wrong," she murmured. Ethan turned, watching her. "About what?" She exhaled, squeezing his fingers. "About you, about love, about thinking it could never last." Ethan smiled softly. "And now?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something deep and certain. "Now I know it does." Ethan pressed a kiss to her forehead, letting the moment settle between them. Lucas ran up to them, breathless and grinning. "Did you see that? I caught 3. Ethan crouched down, ruffling his hair. "That's impressive, kid. Maybe I should start calling you Firefly Whisperer." Lucas laughed, then suddenly wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist, squeezing tight. "I love you, Ethan." Ethan felt his chest tighten, warmth spreading through him. He hugged Lucas back, his voice steady and sure. "I love you too, buddy." Sophia watched them, her heart full, and for the first time in her life, she let herself believe fully, completely, that this was real. Because love wasn't something you waited for. It wasn't something you feared losing. It was something you chose. And together, they had chosen forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps out the channel. And if you want more heartwarming and emotional stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this one. I'd love to hear your reactions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.